Now, Africa is grappling with a huge debt burden since 2010, roughly 4 times the region's growth rate. That is according to UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed. Speaking at the 10th Africa Regional Forum in Addis Ababa, Mohammed said that Africa faces all-time high debt servicing costs that, of course, have frozen the continent's economic push towards sustainable development. Now, according to the official, the continent has passed the midway point in the implementation of the UN 2030 Agenda Sustainable Development Goals. However, achieving the SDGs by the 2030 deadline requires concrete action by African governments to leverage this continent's vast natural and renewable resources, which are essential for the transition to green economies. Well, let's now delve more into that event, the 10th Africa Regional Forum, which was in Addis Ababa. And let's find out more from UN Economic Commission for Africa Executive Secretary, Mr. Clavier Gatete. Mr. Gatete, great to have you on the show with us today. What a pleasure. Now, of course, this forum was looking to revisit and also reinforce the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals, and also Agenda 2063, which goal was to eradicate poverty in times of multiple crises. Now, given the current global economic realities, how did you approach these issues at this year's forum?
Yeah, thank you very much. And indeed, we just completed the Africa Regional Forum for Sustainable Development, and we are taking stock of the achievements and the amount of work going ahead. And this is also happening at the time when we are working with the international financial institutions and all partners to see how we can reform the international financial architecture that can help in terms of providing relief for the current financial situation that we are in. We are also looking at what needs to change at the domestic level in terms of domestic resource mobilization, including the scaling up of taxation and also creating stock exchanges in many of our countries to create some of the long-term resources for the private sector. But also most urgently, we are looking at the rechanneling of the SDR so that this money can be leveraged many times in the in the African Development Bank and also the Inter-American Development Bank. This at the ECA, we are also working together with other partners to make sure that we can change the approach on how we implement the different programs. We are now focusing at the regional level so that we can leverage the private sector resources by de-risking some of the big programs that have an impact on many of the countries. And this is because really of the current situation. As you said, the debt is extremely high. It has increased by over 180% since 2020. But also on the African continent, it is 66% of GDP. So this is not sustainable. And that's why we are doing different things differently, because we have had 50 million people on the African continent, really more since 2020, since the time of COVID, that are flowing into the poverty levels. And that's why we are trying to do different things in different ways to make sure that we can attack this issue of increase in growth that we are seeing.
All right. Now, of course, you were also revisiting some of these agendas at this year's forum, and I'd like to get a sense of the progress, because African member states, they're midway through the implementation of the 2030 agenda, and UNECA actually says that progress on most of those SDGs are off track or moving too slow or have completely regressed as of now. So tell us what progress has been made on these agendas in the past 5 years. Has it been enough?
Well, indeed, you're correct, because of what has happened, because of the COVID, because of the current situation of climate, and also the different conflicts. They have affected really development in a serious way. And we are seeing only progress in 12 out of 17 SDGs. And that's why when we are discussing here, the United Nations has taken a decision that in as much as we implement all the different goals, but there should be more emphasis on those ones that really have significant impact on several of the different SDGs. And some of them include the food systems, the energy that we are focusing on, access and affordability, the digital technology, education, jobs and social protection, and of course, the issue of climate. And this is where we are working not only within the United Nations system, but also working with other partners, including private sector and governments, to see how we can focus most of our resources in these 6 transitions that are going to be impactful in so many of the SDGs. So this combined with what we are trying to mobilize in terms of external resources, we believe it's going to have an impact in terms of reversing the losses that we've had in SDGs.
Well, when we talk about how exactly you plan to do this going forward, financing, always at the top of the list. Now, the IMF is forecasting a modest slowdown in emerging markets and developing economies. They say we might see a slight acceleration for advanced economies. So how will this realities impact the implementation and the progress of these agendas with a slowdown expected?
Well, we expect, of course, that's why there has to be a different way of looking at these things. For example, with SDGs, we have now entered into the area of supporting the countries in the innovative financing. Apart from the resources for climate, for example, we are also innovating into green bonds, into the blue bonds. We are going to the carbon market, which has been is an area that we never used to. Although we are trying to see how the price for the carbon can also increase now that we are supporting many of our own countries. We're also trying to see the different ways on how we can address the issues of the debt, also including, of course, the common framework which will be there to be improved. And if that happens, then to give more room for countries to make sure that they can improve in terms of their fiscal space. That way, then it can really give room for investment at the domestic level, but also at the global level. That's why we are saying that domestic resource mobilization needs to be looked at and very quickly to make sure that we can really improve our own situation. Currently, the revenue to GDP ratio on the continent is on average about 15.8%, and this is not enough. We need much more. We need to make sure that we do things differently, and that's why we're learning from each other. In the last conference of ministers of finance, development and planning, we narrowed down on the areas, on issues that we can do that can help in terms of improving the current situation.
Now, also, this year's discussions took place under the cloud of several conflicts across the globe. Right now, we have the conflict in Sudan. We have political instability in a lot of African states, or some African states, rather. We also have the Middle East conflict and the Russia-Ukraine conflict. How did this cloud sort of discussions, how did it impact discussions at this year's forum?
Yeah, indeed, you are right, because of the many conflicts that we have on the African continent and globally, they have a significant impact. They cause displacement in terms of people, but at the same time, they cause disruptions in our own systems, meaning that cost of energy increases. And once the cost of energy increases, it affects everything else. It affects the price of food because, as you know, moving the food from rural area to urban area becomes very expensive because of the fuel. It affects development because energy is a critical input. And that, of course, has a huge impact in terms of inflation. And that exacerbates, of course, the situation that we have in terms of increasing debt, because it also has an impact on the foreign exchange for many of our countries. So we are seeing this one as really something that continuously affecting our own countries. But of course, we have to work on this, on the remedial measures that can help improve the situation. And that's what we are working on with the African Union in terms of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, trying to see what we can do ourselves on the continent, and how can we make sure that this market really improves significantly to allow trade among the African countries in terms of building infrastructure, in terms of value addition for many of the companies, so that we don't have to export unprocessed commodities, but also making sure that we work at the region and then we improve the trade among the African countries. Currently, it's about 15% in pro-Africa trade, But as we try to improve and implement the CFTA, we believe that this situation is going to improve.